Hi everyone, welcome back to Just Make It, a channel where you can watch a dentist try and make his ideas come to life. Now, I'm always looking for ways to modify my little makerspace in my house, whether that be organisational, functional, or just some random idea that comes to me in the spur of the moment. So in this video, I'm going to be talking you through how I made this little volume control knob that's mounted onto my desk, and it helps me control the volume of my computer using a physical knob rather than relying on the keyboard. A bit unnecessary, but totally worth it. Let's get into it. Right guys, so really this project is made up of two main components. Firstly, our microcontroller. For this project we're going to be using an Arduino Micro. This is one of my favourite microcontrollers for two main reasons. Firstly, my computer can read this as a USB device, so that means that it will be perfectly placed to send commands to the computer via USB, and for this project that's basically perfect. The second thing is that it's very small. I've got some pins soldered on here. The one that I'll be using for the actual project, I probably won't use this one. But even with the pins, it's very small, which means you can have a nice compact form factor. For powering, we're going to be powering this directly via USB-C, so we don't really need to have any other considerations with regards to batteries, etc. So that's a nice simple bit there. And then our second component, of course, is the rotary encoder. This is obviously what we will be using to control the volume. It goes clockwise, anti-clockwise, and it's got a little button. So the intention is that when I turn the knob clockwise, volume goes up, opposite for anti-clockwise, and I'm intending to have a little mute function. So when I press the button, the volume mutes. So that's the hardware, all pretty straightforward. Now we're going to hop over onto ChatGPT and see if we can get a sketch made for this. So guys, here we are in ChatGPT. Before we can get started with the software side of things, there's just a couple of other things that we should go through. Firstly, for this project, we're going to need this library. It's called the HID project, or the Human Interface Devices Project library. And basically, it lets our Arduino emulate other human interface devices such as keyboards and mice. And for this project, our volume controller is basically going to be acting like a mini keyboard, so this project is important, and I'll show you how to install that in a minute. The second thing, if you go to the Microsoft page, you get these virtual key codes, and these basically give us the hex values of different functions on a keyboard. So for example, the pause key, alt key, control key, shift key, so on and so forth. So if you search for volume, you get the three functions we're going to need: volume up, volume down, and the volume mute key, and their corresponding hex values. This is really important, and it's what we're going to give to ChatGPT and ask you to emulate using the HID project library. And over in the Arduino IDE, in order to install the HID project library, you go to Library Manager, just like you would for any other library, type in HID project, and you should see that I've already got mine installed. You can go ahead and install yours, just make sure you're using the latest version. So with those two bits out of the way, we can head back over into GPT and get a sketch ready. Now that I had that vital information in hand, I was able to log onto ChatGPT and use it to generate wiring instructions and a sketch that I could use to test this idea and make sure it actually works as a proof of concept. Armed with that information, I was ready to move on to putting it all together. For anyone who's interested, I'll have a link to the sketch that I used in the description below. So, after a little bit of work, we'd hit our first checkpoint. Wiring up the two components with jumper cables and uploading the sketch GPT gave me a working prototype. So that was a good first step. So now that I was happy that the circuit was working as intended, it was time to start giving some thought as to what kind of design I wanted to go for. So something that I do quite commonly is just browse the internet to see if someone's made something similar and see if I can draw some inspiration. So I had a look on Google And the design that I found that looked closest to what I had in mind was this on the right side here. So what I like about this is that it sort of protrudes a little bit from underneath the desk, and it's at a nice angle, so it allows nice easy access. Now I don't think the one I'm going to be making is going to be as nice or as refined as this, but this is the overall look that we're going to be going for. So with that in mind, now it's time to jump into Fusion 360 and start designing. At this point, it was just a case of experimenting different designs in Fusion 360, tinkering, tweaking until you kind of approximate the one that you think looks good and the one you had in mind. So guys, this is the first design that I came up with, and it's okay, but the reason why I didn't decide to go for this one is firstly, it looks a little bit more like a TV remote. So this is where the rotary encoder knob would be, and here's the USB-C slot for the Arduino. And more practically, I feel like it would be sticking out from underneath the desk too far, so there's a higher risk of me knocking it off or something. So that was the first design which I decided not to go with. And after playing about with it a little bit more, this is the design that I thought works really well. So this isn't put together all the way. You can actually hear the Arduino rattling inside there, but here's obviously the knob where we'll be controlling the volume, and there's our USB-C space. You can actually see the Arduino just there. What I like about this design is that it's a little bit flatter, it's a little bit thinner, and there's less chance of me knocking out from underneath the desk. Now the only thing that I need to do is go back into Fusion 360 and design a mount that this can go into, and then I can use that to fix it onto my desk. So we're nearly getting there. And another thing I realised, this was printed with a 0.4mm nozzle, if the focus wants to work. There we go. So this, so just going through this design again. And one more thing, this was printed with a 0.4mm nozzle, and when it comes to printing the final version, I don't think that's going to quite cut it. If you look carefully in here, this is meant to be a space for the top of a bolt, one of my M2 bolts to go through. That's just completely sort of mangled up in there, and I think that's because the 0.4 nozzle is a little bit too, it's a bit too big for small details like that, and I've had similar issues there. So that's where the nuts need to be going at the bottom, and the sizes haven't come out correctly. So when I print the final version, this will be done in a 0.2mm nozzle. But for now, I'm quite happy enough with the design to move on to designing the rest. So let's go from there. And here's the mount that's going to house the controller and fix onto my desk. And then it was on to one of my favourite parts of any project, soldering. So you might have seen in some of my other videos, I've quite regularly used my Omni Fixer. I think it's probably one of the best things I've bought in terms of making projects. It really does what it says on the tin. It's like your second pair of hands. The soldering iron I use is quite a normal one, and then obviously just normal solder to get everything joined up. So that's what you see me doing here. I used a little mounting pad underneath the Arduino Micro just to fix it onto the inner surface of the base, the bottom part of the box, and then I used the USB-C cable to almost pull the Micro into the position that I needed to be in. Right guys, so I had to take everything apart. We ran into a little Right guys, so I had to take everything apart. We ran into a little hurdle, which I'll try and show here. So this is a slot for the USB-C port, and if you guys look closely you can see this port hole there and the one on the mount don't actually line up. So the USB-C, I tried fitting it through, it's getting caught in that little bit there. And what's more, this is such a tight fit I can't actually get it out again. So it's time for a reprint and another go. Right guys, here we are. So it took a little bit of fiddling, but I was able to get the volume controller into the little mount that we made here, and most importantly, I'm actually able to get the USB-C cable in to power everything on. So just to confirm that everything works, there you go. You guys might have heard that Windows noise in the background, so that's all working. And now let me take the camera over to the screen and then we can make sure everything's working as intended. Right guys, so here's my volume there, and there you go. So that's me using the little controller on the side and the mute. Now the mute function is a little bit janky, it doesn't seem to work at the first press, so that may be a software issue I need to iron out, but for the main part that's working perfectly. So we're very close to finishing off now. So having a look at the finished product guys, I still feel like something's a little bit missing, and one idea I've just come up with is all this empty space on the left side of the knob here. Obviously we need to design and print a knob, that goes without saying, we'll do that in a little while, but on the left side, all this empty space, what I'm thinking of doing is printing almost like a little decal, a volume symbol that sort of arcs around, and it tells you how to increase, how to decrease, and I think it'll just fill a little bit of this empty space and make it look quite nice. In terms of colour, rather than going for this matte black PLA, I think I'll do something that contrasts with the silver just to give it a little bit more colour. So let's go back into Fusion 360 and see if we can do that. Once I've printed it, I'm going to try and super glue it on just to make sure it sticks firmly, and then I think we're ready to mount this onto the desk. So we're nearly there. So guys, I've gone through my filament rack and I think this will be a nice contrasting colour. This is a silk PLA, I believe it's called Copper. It's from a brand called Tin Mori. They're quite good, I use quite a lot of their filament, not sponsored. And I think this will come off quite nicely off that silver back plate. So I'm just going to change the filament over on my Prusa and then we can get that printed out. Designing the label or the logo for the volume was quite straightforward. I already had the top part of the box in Fusion 360, so I could just model off that. It was as simple as just drawing two arcs, joining them with a horizontal line, and then playing about with the position until I thought it looked quite nice. Right guys, so here is the pretty much finished product. So that looks quite nice, that copper coloured on the black, sorry, that copper PLA on the silver backing. I think that looks quite nice. I modified the mount off camera and I printed another version just in case I ever need to take this out. I've got somewhere to apply a little bit of pressure to push things out, but I think that should be fine for the foreseeable future. And of course these are our screw holes that we use to mount this onto our desk. So the last, but certainly not least part of this project is to print out a knob. That shouldn't take too long, and for the knob I'm definitely going to be using the same copper PLA. I think that would be a very nice matching look. So we're going to jump back into Fusion 360 and model the knob, and then we should be home and dry. So we're nearly there. So modelling the knob is quite a straightforward thing to do. I had already made a mock-up of the encoder shaft in an earlier part of the video, so it was just a case of making a cylinder, extruding it down to the length of the shaft, using the combine and cut features in Fusion 360 to create a negative space, and then just building in some group features. I actually printed this with 3 different tolerances, I didn't actually know which one would fit right. As it happened, it was a 0.05 tolerance on this one that fit really well, as you'll see later on in the video. So the tolerance on that knob was no good. I had to go back to Fusion 360, tighten it up a little bit, and then get it printed again so it fit a bit better. Alright everybody, so here is everything finished, done and dusted. The knob works perfectly, it's a nice firm fit, only friction fit, so I don't need to use any glue for this bit. I think that'll hold quite well. We got our nice decal there for the volume control, and then the rest is all put together. So now the final step is to mount this onto the underside of my desk and then route this USB-C cable up from underneath my desk to a USB port, and then we're all done. So let's go ahead and get on with some drilling. And really mounting it to the desk was probably the easiest part of the whole project. If you go back to the model earlier on, you'll see that I built in a couple of little mounting holes for screws to go through. It was just a case of putting it on underneath the desk and fixing it in place with 2 long screws and a drill bit. Quite straightforward, this part. And that's a wrap, guys. So project successfully completed. I'm able to control the volume of my computer without having to rely on any keys, and it just adds a little bit of a futuristic look to the desk. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please consider liking, subscribing and leaving some comments down below. Let me know if you've got any ideas for any other projects that you'd like me to have a go at. In the meanwhile, I'll leave some links to similar projects. Until then, see you all next time. Bye bye.